Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be, and welcome to today's webinar, The Hard Reboot, Tech Enabling the Travel Recovery. Thank you so much for joining us for this fantastic webinar today. We have a great lineup of speakers ahead of us. But first, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Paul Bremner. I haven't changed that. Actually, I'm the Chief of Staff at the Pacific Asia Travel Association, and I will be your host for today. Before we get to our lineup of presenters and our panel discussion, just have a quick couple notes for you. Later today, I said we have a panel discussion, so if you have any questions for our panelists, please use the Q&A function as noted on your screen at the bottom of your browser. Please do not submit any questions using the chat function, as it's difficult for the moderator to look at both the chat and the Q&A, as well as moderate the session at the same time. Feel free to, using the chat function, to say hello to your fellow participants. If you have any insights regarding any of the presentations you see today, feel free to drop them in the chats. And with that, that is the end of just this quick tutorial about Zoom, or a reminder for those of you who are very familiar with it. Just one other note regarding the speakers. All the speaker bios are on our website, so we won't go into much of an introduction. We'll just probably introduce their names and titles. I'm sure they'll introduce themselves as well. But if you want more information about each of the speakers, feel free to go to our website and read their full bio on our website at www.pata.org. So, without further ado, let's officially open today's webinar. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome PATA CEO Liz Ortiguer to give her opening remarks and a travel and tech tourism industry edtech perspective. Liz, over to you.
Thank you, Paul. And first of all, a warm welcome and thank you to our great collection of speakers selected from across our PATA members and partner network today. And thank you to Victor and Vin Capital for their collaboration in developing our recent report, The Hard Reboot, Technology Powers Mobility. We're now 2.5 years into the impact of this global pandemic. And from the beginning, I've been a big believer that from crisis comes innovation. Reason being that the critical needs start to emerge in a crisis, and this sharpens the focus and the imperative to find solutions. In July of last year, PATA launched the Travel Innovations Hub. This can be found on our website, and it's focused on crowdsourcing recovery solutions from around the world. Have a look at the site. Many of the solutions have ongoing application, even beyond this pandemic period. Our Innovations Hub crowdsources ideas in various categories relevant to travel: aviation, hospitality, education, government, plus a special section on vaccine campaigns. We add ideas to this every week. Feel free to send us your innovation idea if you read an interesting article, or if you have in your business an interesting product, service, innovation that we can profile and feature. I'm going to now switch hats a bit today from CEO of PATA and speak on the use of new technology solutions for education. Prior to my joining PATA, I've worked in different industries, first as a scientist in pharma, then for many years in American Express, but most recently, I worked in the startup world. And specifically, I worked with 2 digital platforms, with the most recent being a mobile-first technology solution for education, or as we call it, EdTech. All organizations across the travel sector have had a need to recover quickly, cost efficiently, and very dynamically. So organizations in travel should really consider the use of mobile-first EdTech as an efficient means of developing their staff and keeping them engaged. One misperception about mobile learning is that it's lightweight and just for fun, soft content. With mobile-first micro-learning platforms, it's actually the opposite. It's highly effective, science-based, and a really effective means for delivering critical content. If we think about how we as humans today consume content, it's in short, bite-sized pieces of information. When we read articles, watch short videos. This format is the most conducive way that we like to absorb information now. In addition, when you can reinforce that with getting learners to upload videos or submit answers after feeding them small bites of information, you're actually very effectively reinforcing learning in the most effective way. It's a highly efficient way to ensure understanding of, for example, health and safety protocols, technical skills, and compliance topics, as an example. The other advantage is that you can readily reach all of your staff since everyone has a mobile phone. Not everyone has a laptop, especially in the lower income frontliners. Mobile first platforms are an effective tool to deploy cost-efficient, effective training to frontline travel and tourism workers. While I'm not here to advocate a particular platform, there are dozens, but I'll share a couple of examples. Two that I'm familiar with are Nobi and Tipsy. The Nobi platform that I worked on for a year was used by the Singapore government to train non-medical frontliners. For example, hospitality workers who were supporting some of the field hospitals that were set up. So the Singapore government used mobile first to communicate and train them on infection prevention and control in the throes of the pandemic. And this is for staff who were non-medical and really needed to deal at the front lines in supporting testing, vaccinations, and in some cases, field hospitals and care. The Singapore government also used a mobile first platform to give education support to the travel, tourism, and F&B industry. In this market, it was actually 90% subsidized or offered free courses for these impacted staff via the mobile phone. The courses ranged from everything from digital marketing to learning about AI to learning health and safety protocols. And then lastly, our own PATA Foundation used another mobile platform, Tipsy, that specializes in hospitality to deliver course content to the students at Salabai, a charity hotel and restaurant school in Cambodia. And it was an effective means to reach these students. Even when they were in lockdown, they couldn't show up for classes in person, and they were in remote locations. So my lesson today would be invest in your people by using cost-effective, efficient, and modern mobile learning platforms. That's my sharing for today. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Liz, for the insightful look into EdTech and how it can help in the recovery of the industry. So let's move right along, as we do have many speakers with us today, many fantastic speakers. Next, to actually talk a bit more about the report that Liz had mentioned, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founding and managing partner at Vin Capital. He will be talking about Make It Sustainable, Reinventing Travel with Technology. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Victor Chua. Victor, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Paul. So just a bit of a technicality support. Can Pata allow me to share screen?
You should be able to. I think you were able to.
Now I can.
Okay.
Yes.
And just speak up a bit. I think the sound is a little bit
Sure.
lower in your end.
Okay. Sorry about that. All right. Can you see my screen? Oh.
Yep, looks good.
Okay. Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for having me here today, and of course, really appreciate the time that Pata, Liz, Paul, and the team had been spending with us on the report. It was a good journey. I think the whole initiative started right about the time when COVID was obviously still at its height. But nevertheless, it has been a great experience working with Pata. My topic today, Make It Sustainable, is really to talk about, to resonate with some of the points that Liz has mentioned just now on how technology should be embedded in the daily lives of the travel industry. But of course, I think it will be good for me to give you a bit of background to who we are and why are we talking about technology versus travel. As a brief introduction, we are a VC firm, venture capital firm. We are not a typical travel industry player. We are headquartered in Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur. We do investments into early stage technology firms in the region, in Southeast in particular. We have always been about creating value, creating foundation that's good enough for the industries that we are working with. In particular, we are a partner for UNWTO. We work closely with Tata. From Japan side, we work with Nippon Travel Agency as well. Our interest in travel is because of the fact that we think that technology has a huge potential to enable and empower travel industry players in how we have been doing business since forever. That's why we have been investing a lot into travel related sector, mobility sectors, which is why we have a number of companies from the region that has been performing well. I think a few particular ones that I would like to highlight from our side is that we've invested into a travel tech company from Indonesia, Travelio. They're the largest travel and property management platform from the country that's backed by Korean companies, some real funds, as well as Chinese VC firms. They have been around even when long before COVID started, and definitely they have shown that such a business model is here to stay in Indonesia, and definitely a lot of improvisation has been done in order to actually adapt to the environment. But in particular to the reports, I think one of the notes that we wanted to highlight is that the industry, in terms of contribution to GDP, we have lost about $4.5 trillion just in 2020. I know that this is a very old number, but the whole idea of highlighting this figure is that the pandemic is not a standalone incident. A lot of these issues could happen again over time, and I think from Vin Capital's point of view, definitely we think that technology is the best way, a best solution for all of us to actually be able to ride the waves that is not within our control. Which is why most of the time when we work with large corporates, when we work with industry players, we'd always have the same conversation that what Liz has just mentioned, to actually adopt the new ways of doing business and to allow technology to help scale your operations in many ways. For the report itself, I'm sure at this point of time, most of you would already have a copy. Otherwise, feel free to go to Pata's website, download the copy, or from our website as well. We basically use the travel and tourism competitive index that was done by the World Economic Forum, adjusted the weightages to allow for the reflection of what was going on in the region, in the world, because of COVID. I think the argument here is that we need to be prepared to be agile, to actually look at the circumstances by looking at, taking into consideration of what's happening around the world. For us in particular, we have increased weightings to three of the pillars under the enabling environment, safety and security, health and hygiene, as well as ICT readiness. At the end of the day, we believe that technology is the best way out for excuse me, for all of us if we are to address the drastic damages that's done by COVID. We adjusted the weightage based on the things that we believe would be important for the industry. That's why we also looked a lot into the infrastructure element, where because of the fact that air transportation was heavily affected and it was essential for outbound tourism. For ground and port infrastructure measures the accessibility and connectivity to local economies. As well as highlighted by the World Economic Forum, ground port and air transportation has always been positively correlated to capacity to handle growth or tourism. That's why we put a higher weightage considerably relative to the original TCI index, and this is how we came about with the scoring. As you can see over here, based on the adjustment that we have seen, and also the forecasted growth in the travel and tourism industry, there were certain changes that was seen compared to the original one. According to the ones that we have, Japan appears to be doing much better based on the adjustments we have done, and we think that there's still a lot of growth potential for different markets, as long as technology has been adopted and utilized. But I think more importantly, we also wanted to highlight in the report that throughout the many pandemics that we have seen so far, there's always been a strong technology or innovation play that helps to enable the travel and tourism industry. In the past, I guess bringing us back to the 1920s era, when we had the Spanish flu. This was the point where disinfectant spray was kind of invented, was more widely used at hotels, and there were mass production of cars, allowing for transportation and mobility to become more common. And fast forward to I think the 1960s, where the Hong Kong flu happened. Sabre obviously it was created during that point of time, where automated reservation system for airlines were created to enable for better distribution of air tickets, etc. And of course, moving forward back to the SARS era, a lot more new innovation was created because of the fact that we have mobile phones. Mobile phones became a lot more common for consumers. That's why we saw the OTAs, we saw a lot of the travel companies started utilizing this new medium as a way to actually attract more customers and to allow for more convenience. And at this point of time, we definitely see a lot more new solution that's being created, or perhaps it's more of an improvisation where existing technology firms are changing the way they do business to allow for better support for existing industry players to move ahead with what they have been doing in the past. VR technology was created, and I think usually travel industry becomes one of the first sector to experience the new adoption of solutions because of the fact that if travel industry has always been deemed as the more adventurous industry in terms of allowing for more innovation and allowing for better adoption of solutions. That this is how we visualize the moving forward. A traveler would actually be looking at how to search for different sort of platforms to allow them to travel better. How do they make bookings, and how do they actually make the actually move from point A to point B, and eventually looking at how do they actually move around on the destination, and finally figuring out where to go next. For us, I think whenever we look at technology opportunities, it's really about breaking down the whole value chain and to actually understand how would a consumer be behaving differently pre and post the pandemic. We think that throughout the last 2.5 years, a lot of education has been done to allow for consumers to be more digitally savvy. Because of the fact that by being digitally savvy, it provides them more safety, more security, and better understanding of what's going on in terms of local destinations. That's why we think that throughout the whole value chain of any trips, any tours, there will be a lot more usage of technology. These are some of the examples of companies that has been striving on new solutions that the industry could actually look at to work with or to actually adopt in order to have a better ability to address the new demand from new consumers as well. I think in particular we have seen a lot of insure tech company that has been embedding the element of health as well as to take into account of the impact of the pandemic in the way they design insurance products for travelers or for airlines as well. Locally, as I mentioned before this, one of our portfolio companies, Travelio, they have also been working with sanitization firms to allow for better adoption of cleansing as well as safetiness and hygiene protection for travelers as well. So I suppose a lot of these details can be read from the report. I wouldn't want to spend too much time on this in the interest of today's event. With that, I would like to end my session and move us back to Paul. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Victor, for that quick sort of introduction into what's happening now in terms of the startups that are sort of popping up because of the pandemic and sort of a review of what happened in the past. So as Victor said, the report is now available. You just go to our website, www.product.org. Just go look under the catalog and just look for the hard reboot, how technology enables mobility. So thank you very much, Victor. And moving right along, for the sake of time, we've come to our next presenter. our good friend over at Euromonitor. She is the head of travel research, and she'll be talking about the travel innovation landscape in Asia Pacific. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Caroline Bremner. Caroline, over to you.
Thank you, Paul. And it's great to be speaking to Pata again. I'm just going to share my screen and then we can get started. Is that all okay?
Yep, looks perfect.
Brilliant. So thank you for this opportunity to share Euromonitor's latest innovation research with you all. It's always very interesting, coming out of a crisis to see where travel businesses are investing as a means to recover, as Victor was explaining, as well as Liz, the importance of innovation as a recovery lever. At Euromonitor, we speak to many companies, and this is looking at key investments over the next couple of years. And it's interesting to see that Asia Pacific is particularly interested in not just integrating new technology, but also focusing in on diversifying the payments landscape, as well as enhancing cybersecurity. I thought it was also very interesting that besides, the importance of technology, there's a strong focus in the region on personalization, which was an area that Victor was also focusing on. And I also think it's interesting that co-creation, so the importance of bringing consumers into the narrative, into the whole sort of the importance of engaging with consumers to build products that really resonate with them. So the importance of co-creation. Equally at Euromonitor, we ask, what are your, it's not just about digital transformation, it's also the importance of sustainable transformation. As we know, coming out of the pandemic, it's the need to build back better. And when we asked travel companies, where are you investing in terms of sustainability? The number one priority over the next couple of years was on employee support programs. So I thought what Liz was talking about in terms of mobile first education solutions for staff, you can see that that is a really strong, an important step. And it's really, companies are really putting the emphasis for that lifelong learning support. 63% saying that they're going to invest in sustainable innovation products. And run through a couple of case studies. We saw in Victor's presentation the importance of the value chain and brands, for example, in Japan, such as Prince Martin, using this sort of innovation for that contactless, safe and seamless experience. So using technology before, during and after, so that it's really seamless when the consumer arrives at the property. They can check in, they can check out, they've got their keyless mobile entry to the room. They can sort of use the technology in room, smart speakers, smart mirrors, all sort of powered by, behind the scenes by artificial intelligence and data. So it's really a very sort of high tech, but very consumer centric experience that they're having. And of course, one step further is the use of AI and robotics for the sort of robot butlers or security, or sort of the robot doorman kind of experience. Equally, we know that business travel, again staying with Japan, we saw that in October 21, there was a Japanese group that got together on a VR platform, and the whole sort of annual meeting was conducted in the metaverse. So people turned up as their avatars, they raised their hands, you know, as avatars. And it's quite an interesting dynamic because, one, we know that business travel has been truly disrupted, claims that it will never return to those pre-crisis levels. And so it's interesting to see just how virtual reality, augmented reality is going to change the face of business travel forever. And equally, we see that, you know, it also boosts diversity and inclusion because, you know, as an avatar, people don't know who's actually sitting behind the face of the avatar. So, you know, it's really empowering for consumers. Equally, we know the importance of electrification. We have the net zero roadmap that we need to be on. It's interesting to see what's happening in Singapore with Surya, and obviously the fact we have electrical vertical takeoff and landing, the eVTOL is also coming into play. So it's the electrification of car fleets, of buses, of transport, but then also the importance of electrifying air and aviation is so important for this shared future, and making sure that we truly decarbonize and meet our objectives for 2030 and 2050. So going further into the future, we know that there's going to be all these devices that connect together, whether it's, you know, vehicles, drones, robots, appliances, and, you know, we are going to have with the rise of, you know, the new web and, you know, new technology, not just 5G, but looking at 6G, everything is going to be truly hyper connected. And so that's going to be an opportunity and a challenge for travel businesses as we move into extended reality, the importance of holograms and digital twins, and that we're already seeing it with the metaverse today as well. But, you know, there is this opportunity for highly connected and truly immersive travel experiences. So taking one eye and looking at the future, we may even see new digital travel businesses that are truly based on solely on artificial intelligence. So not just mobile first, but AI first. So I'd like to say thank you so much for inviting me today. I'd just like to leave you with some thoughts that the future of innovation is going to be digital, sustainable, safe, and people-centric. And obviously there's some fantastic opportunities for PATA and its members. Obviously at Euromonitor, we're delighted to partner with PATA and support these initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Beautiful presentation as always, and very insightful. You touched on sort of the metaverse. I really love to see how that sort of evolves over the next few years, and how, you know, destinations and stakeholders sort of take advantage of that. It's kind of interesting. I know there's a lot of people interested in that subject. So thank you so much for your presentation. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'm happy to pass them on to Caroline, and I'm sure the presentation will be made available after this webinar. So as I said, moving right along, we'll get to our next presenter. And with us from Visa, we have the Principal Asia Pacific Economist. We'll be talking about the evolution of payment tech and consumer trends. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Glenn B. McGuire. Glenn? All right, over to you.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to join you today. Let me just share my screen. Technology is certainly playing a very deep and important role in this recovery. And I think how we embrace technology and innovation really was a key to how we moved through COVID and how we're moving into the recovery. And as much as we focus on the hard reboot, I think it's important that we also focus on the soft reboot that is occurring as well. And a very important complement to the hard reboot, the technology and the innovation that we've seen that will enable the travel recovery is the data that is generated by that and how we contextualize that data, because it will be looking at that data that really optimizes the technological and innovation foundations of the recovery. And it will be the data that allows us to really sort of contextualize whether the efficiencies from this technological innovation are really starting to embed. So just to start off with, any data that we share here is on a use case basis. It's not representative of our operational performance at all. But I would like to share with you what our sort of transaction data is showing about the travel recovery to date. And despite the continued pandemic, we have seen travel continue to improve into 2021. And it's starting off on a firmer footing on 2022. But we can see globally that the travel recovery has been quite uneven. And if we look at North America in the first instance, we see that travel in 2021 has increased around 42% compared to 2019, up from 30% in 2011. But a key trend that we have coming through is the popularity of beach destinations. And one of the reasons for that that's revealed by our soft survey data is a key concern travelers have after safety, after insurance, after cost, is around the diminishment of the experience. So you could go to one of your favorite cities in Europe and a museum that you love is closed. You could go to Italy and one of your favorite restaurants is closed. There's limitations or social distancing around these key attractions and experiences. And that's coming through very strongly, that in the travel recovery, consumers are very concerned about the diminishment of the experience. And that's why we're seeing beaches really trending strongly in the recovery, because a beach is essentially a beach. They're opening, and in many cases, after 2.5 years of no travel, beaches and natural attractions are opening in pristine conditions. If we have a look at Europe, we can see that Europe is experiencing quite a strong recovery, up around 45% in 2021. But what we notice in Europe is that the majority of travel is short haul or to neighboring countries. And it looks similar to a gravity model of the travel recovery. But what we think it reflects is, one, the evenness of vaccination across Europe. So people feel safer traveling to neighboring countries. And also people are sort of putting their first sort of touch or their first taste of the travel recovery by choosing to travel short haul. And by short haul, we mean less than 3,000 kilometers. So that's sort of enabling sort of shorter holidays as people sort of examine the interoperability and how frictionless the travel recovery is in that first instance. So it's not so much driven by price, but kind of more of the evenness of progress in vaccination and interoperability in the European recovery. If we look at Asia Pacific in 2021, travel was actually lower than what it was in 2020, reflecting the unevenness of vaccination. And also some of these dynamics I talked about before, such as neighboring countries, short haul. Short haul isn't really a concept in Asia. Australia is 5,000 kilometers across. Tokyo to Jakarta is 8,000 kilometers. It really is sort of a medium haul to longer haul region. And the commitment to travel, one, requires more time, 2, more finances, and most of the progress in vaccination evenness in Asia occurred in the second half of 2021. So we actually see that laying the foundations for a very strong travel recovery over the course of 2022. But we definitely are seeing technology enabling the recovery more. And in terms of how we sort of look at the travel journey, as a payments network, we tend to see kind of like the end point when the transaction occurs. But we are increasingly using novel data sources to analyze this. And one of the useful ones is behavior of travel apps. So we tend to watch what's happening with average daily users and also downloads. And what we find is downloads tend to move around, or did move around, with announcements around vaccination travel lanes, etc. We'd see more people downloading when their country was starting to open up. And then we'd see the active users, or the daily active users, tend to gain momentum once we started to see dynamics such as vaccination travel lanes, sort of more relaxation or harmonization of travel requirements, etc. But compared to search, when we look at apps, as apps often have a booking mechanism in them, they bring us one step closer to actualization. So they're a really important dynamic in providing visibility of how the consumer is feeling and being that much closer to the actual step of transaction. So I'd like to thank you for the invitation to speak at this panel today. Just to conclude, the foundations for the recovery have certainly been laid over 2021. And it will be a recovery that is characterized by the deepening of the technology that was embedded over the period that we were all largely immobile. But as borders open and as we become more mobile, it's important to recognize that it's kind of like the soft reboot, and the data that is the feedback mechanism on how we are optimizing that technological deepening and really fully harnessing the opportunity of the recovery. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Glenn, for that sort of your presentation. I like to see it's that travel is recovering, so it's really very great to see that, and hopefully as more destinations open up in this region, we'll see a more robust recovery over the next hopefully few months. But you know, it all depends on policies of the various governments. So thank you so much, Glenn. And if there's any questions, feel free to pass them over to us, and I'm happy to send them over to Glenn and the team at Visa. So moving right along, we've come to our next presentation. And with that, please welcome the Global Senior Director of Business Development at Expedia to be talking about travel research and AI in travel. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Andrew Vanderveldt.
Thank you, Paul, and good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody who's joined. I love these type of webinars where I'm also learning, and I'm thankful to the presenters who've come before me. Some really insightful stuff there, which I love and have taken some notes myself. Let me start sharing my screen so that we can start with mine. Glenn mentioned data at the source, and I think this is key to a lot of what we do at the Expedia Group. And it's the technology, as many already know probably, that Expedia is a tech company that's in travel, and tech leads everything with that, and data is the cornerstone of how we empower that technology. So it's the data capture of the traveler. It's the way that we utilize and enable that data to help us create strategies. And it's also about how we use technology to create the solutions to engage with those travelers that are coming to our sites itself. As Liz at the beginning said, it's 2.5 years. We've had an incredible journey during those 2.5 years globally. The one thing that didn't stop, and I think was made mention of as well from Victor through to Glenn, is that people have traveled differently around the world, and with that have left a lot of data behind in terms of their choices they've made. We've been following this very closely for the last 2.5 years, informing our partners, working with them to give those insights, because we do believe that obviously as we work together as an industry, it helps us rebuild the industry globally as well. And that data that we've been capturing has helped us understand how the intent to travel has changed, the behaviors have changed, but also in terms of the way that booking windows have really accelerated, shortened, lengthened, and also the choices of destinations based on, as has been put before, the choices, whether it's short haul or it's long haul, medium haul, from that point of view. So just to give a little bit of context on my presentation, it's looking at how we leverage that data to help us make those decisions moving forward and apply the technology to make that happen. I just want to give a quick introduction to who we are. I mean, Expedia Group, I'm sure most, if not all, have already heard of Expedia Group as a organization, as an OTA. Within that, there is Expedia Media Solutions, which is effectively the digital advertising part of the business. What we are tasked with is effectively engaging with the travelers that come, the millions of engaged travelers that come to our platform, and to work alongside our partners, whether destinations or suppliers, in order to engage with those travelers, to provide them, as many have already said, with a seamless way of booking that travel from the moment that they're searching right through to that conversion and post as well, in terms of that advocacy that comes with that. Where does that data come from? Effectively, the data comes from, as I mentioned, a huge amount of travelers coming to our sites. It leaves around about 300 petabytes of data, huge numbers of information, obviously, that we work with and try to understand as much as we can in terms of having that ability to make assumptions and predictive ways of getting in front of the engaged travelers to encourage them to make the choices that they have in mind, or otherwise with some destinations to encourage them to think of other destinations or parts of destinations as they start their planning. And this is something which is incredibly important as well as we start thinking about that sustainability piece as well, is movement of travelers around the globe and obviously within regions to discover other parts of countries that may not have already been done so. So it is a huge amount of data that comes in from 75 countries where we are operating in 35 different languages. So with that data, it helps us really sort of put that into place. And as I said already, it allows us to start working with our partners to provide those strategies and insights to help them get in front of the travelers that are looking to travel now or in the near future as well. I want to use a couple of case studies to explain a little bit how that works. So we spot a couple of trends, for example, some research in international searches as the borders started relaxing. We did start seeing a lengthening of those booking windows from during the pandemic, which had seen a very much more sort of a 0 to 21 day booking window. Those are now lengthening a little bit more as we see the resurgence of search for international travel from different parts of the world as they reopen up. Certain destinations wanted to tap into, visit Denmark in this case was one of those who wanted to get in front of that audience that was starting to think about international long-haul travel, in this case, the US market. And this is where also other trends come into it. It's that personalization. We've been recognizing that as well, that people are looking for that more personalized aspect to their trips. So in effect, what we created here was a very immersive experience whereby the consumer is put in charge of an experience whereby they are then searching based on their passions. And in the case of, it's not a rolling video, unfortunately, here, but in the case of this particular solution, they were provided with an opportunity where they are physically riding a bike or virtually riding a bike through Copenhagen in this instance, and choosing routes based on their passions, whether it's cultural or it's food or it's music. And in that basis was providing them with the itineraries based on their given passion. So that's a little bit of use of immersive technology to get the traveler to feel that they are in charge and then control of the decisions that they are making in terms of, and helping them with that decision-making process. Other technologies that we've applied, as has been pointed out, has been also like in terms of facial recognition, where we put forward campaigns whereby the consumer is watching it, and based on their facial movements as they watch these videos, they are then provided with itineraries based on what we feel or what they are suggesting are the ones that they like. So technology really finding its way into both the data analysis, but through to also the solutions to provide our partners and ourselves also the ways to engage with those consumers as we move forward. Incredibly, I'm sure it's not a surprise, but we are spending a huge amount of time, more time, and throughout the pandemic certainly, but on average, we are now spending 6 hours and 43 minutes online each day, something which I discourage my children to do, although unsuccessfully. We can't obviously, I would love to have them obviously spend those 6 hours and 43 minutes on our platforms. Obviously, that is not the case. However, technology allows us to reach that audience wherever they are online. And this is again where using our own first-party data and be able to map those travelers on our site, but also to reach them outside of our own site. And this is a technology that allows us to really engage beyond our own borders and reach an audience that may have a slightly less high intent to travel at that point, but certainly in that dormant phase or latent phase of interest in traveling as well. So therefore, bringing that message across. And in typical fashion, an example here is with Las Vegas, where targeting audiences that are out with our own platform, but knowing that they are interested in a particular given destination allows us also then to reach and engage with that. That again, it shows the technology in terms of the data that we have brought through to the targeting possibilities that we have in our own remit. So I just want to touch on a couple of other emerging trends that are coming through. Personalization was talked about. So loyalty is incredibly important as part of that personalization. And we're seeing this movement, volatility in the loyalty as we have across all different industries as well, whether it's travel or other industries. Loyalty is becoming something which is very much part of that personalization. And we ourselves at Expedia have now merged our own different types of programs, loyalty programs across the different brands to be all merged towards the back end of last year as one. So you can earn and burn on different platforms. This also provides travelers who are coming to any of our platforms the possibility to really utilize any of those particular loyalty programs. And this is something which we've seen grow very much in terms of the younger generation, Generation Z, as they come with almost some 40% of those actually now saving and using those loyalty points as part of their trips in 2022. So again, a great opportunity for ourselves, but also our partners that work with, and not just us, but other OTAs that utilize loyalty points, is to engage with those customers that are looking at that particular point as part of that feeling of being personalized and being spoken to. So I know we're on time a little bit, so I just want to point out that, and sort of backing a little bit what Glenn was saying, that data does play, together with technology, an incredibly important part of that whole recovery towards travel globally. And it is about that data contextualization that is terribly important when you apply that technology to it. And with that, I want to thank you very much for the time you've given me this morning to speak a little bit about how we are applying technology towards our approach. Paul, thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. It's interesting to see how you guys are using data on your end, and that's the last of our presentation. I think all the presentations all together give you a fantastic overview of how technology is being used today in different ways. So now we're actually going to have a discussion about that. And with that, let me just pull up my screen here. With that, we're going to come to our panel discussion on transforming the travel journey through technology. I just want to remind you, if you have any questions for any of our panelists, feel free to drop them in the Q&A. Our moderator will choose some questions from the audience and ask it of our panelists. And moderating today's session is the Director of Online Business at Sabre. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Saima Hamidi. Saima, over to you.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And I'm really glad to be moderating this session. As part of a travel technology company myself, this topic is very, very close to my heart. And we've heard the speakers all afternoon today talking about how important technology is I strongly believe it, and there's plenty of research to prove it, that the pandemic has actually accelerated tech adoption, and technology is the number one prerogative to progress right now. And we need to really keep up to speed with the pace. And we have some great speakers today who are going to talk to us about some of the technology innovations that they have been doing, which has the most impact on traveler journey, and how are they managing this pace of change. So let me start with introducing our panelists for the day. We have Andres Bourbon, President and CTO, Okami. Welcome, Andres. I see your video on. Andrew Bubak, Commercial Manager, APAC at Hotelbeds. Hi, Andrew. And Dirk Singer, Research Director at Simplifying. Hello, Dirk. All right. Okay. So before we jump into the topic, I just want to get the panelists a little comfortable. So let's start with the question that is probably the most asked question in the travel industry these days. Have you had a chance to travel yet, and to where recently? So let me start with Andrew, since he's on the top of the screen for me. So Andrew, have you had a chance to travel yet?
I have. I was very fortunate. We go to South Africa most years. My wife is South African, and we managed to get across to South Africa right when the Omicron wave hit here in Australia. So when we left in January, I think there was about 50 or 100 cases a day, and most Australians were freaking out by that. By the time we got back, 20,000 cases a day was normal. So yeah, we managed to go to South Africa, where apparently the Omicron wave started, and then came back to Australia. So yeah, and heading to ATM next month for in Dubai. So yeah, it's starting to get back to normal now, which is great.
Life looks normal now. Andres, what about you?
Actually, I think I had the opportunity to actually travel last December. So after 2 years of no travel lockdown, or only traveling within Thailand, the country where I'm currently based, I was actually able to do a trip to Dubai, also Portugal, then the US. My biggest worry during the whole trip was possibly being infected, but the good thing was that every property I stayed in had very good availability of testing. It could just order it directly to the room. Moving around, booking travel was pretty easy. So overall, it was a much better experience than I expected traveling during the kind of pandemic, but very positive. I think a good sign of things to come.
Excellent. And Dirk?
So I've actually traveled more in 2021 than I have in any other year. And one of the reasons for that is that I'm a dual UK-US national. And of course, the United States for a long period until November had restrictions on non-Americans, especially from Europe traveling to the USA. Now that didn't apply to me because I had a US passport. So I was able to go to the US for work. We had we were involved in a COVID testing business. It was a joint venture with Valaris, the Mexican LCC, on testing, on providing pre-COVID testing from travelers to Mexico to the US. And also I have relatives in the States. So strangely, last year was the year that I've traveled more than any other. And I'm also going to be at ATM in Dubai in a few weeks' time.
Oh, there's going to be a get-together reunion of this
Absolutely.
panel. Great. Okay. I finally got to travel after 2.5 years. So I'm in India right now visiting my parents. It's been such a relief. So Singapore was a lot more stricter than a lot of other countries, but things are opening up. Things look normal now. So with that, let's dive into our topic, transforming the traveler journey through technology. We've heard all our speakers, Victor, Caroline, and they all spoke about all the trends and all the technological advancements that have happened, actually accelerated in the last 2 years. So if we can go around the table, and starting with Andres, if you can talk about, share with the audience a little bit on the major technological innovations that your organization has embarked on in the last 2 years, with a focus on traveler journey or their booking experience.
Oh, sure. Thank you. I'd be glad to. So I think from our point of view, the most impactful part of the customer journey has been providing pre-registration and also pre-check-in services, including support for payments prior to arrival. And then the main way that we're enabling this is through the starting point, either the pre-booking email, pre-arrival emails, SMS, also within the apps that we build for our customers, and including the biggest one has been over social media. So we have the ability for allow a guest to just pre-check in or register online, Facebook, WhatsApp, or even SMS, which has been great to get that communication as a starting point. And I think the biggest change that we've seen also is that the difference between when we say a pre-registration or a pre-check-in is being driven by like the market segments that we cover. So on the higher end travel market, we've seen a shift to like the concept of pre-registration, not pre-check-in. And the main reason is to not lose any personal touch on the customer's expectations when they're arriving. So if you have a high ADR, you want to make sure that that personal touch is expected and has to be given on property. And then the other point, the other part of the industry, the segment, is really adopting more of a completely touchless check-in model where there is no front desk conceptually, and customers can actually do everything from uploading their documents, signing, and paying directly on the app prior to arrival, completely just eliminating the need to kind of go to the traditional front desk. And the main thing that's kind of been driving the growth is really the payments. That's been one big kind of pain point, especially in Asia Pacific, since most PMSs are not directly connected to an online payment gateway. So we've seen the adoption of that, and it's been helping hotels kind of grow their revenue. And even for us, being able to have a very big impact on the services that we provide pre-arrival, because since everybody's been pent up for the last 2 years, everybody wants to kind of start pre-planning and making bookings for their trip that's secure and trusted versus having any chance of missing a potential experience once they arrive on their journey.
And Andrew, you would be seeing that from a Hotelbeds perspective as well, right? Is that so? What about you? What about Hotelbeds? What have they been focusing on for the last 2 years?
Yeah, I think for us, there's probably two major focus areas. One has been ensuring the client's at the center of everything that we do, which obviously sounds very obvious, but it's something that we've done a lot of work on. And the other is trying as much as possible to create a frictionless booking process for our clients. So in terms of the customer, I think one of the things that we've done is providing them with as much data as they possibly can to grow and to be successful. So we've developed two tools. One's called the Compass and the other's called the Compass Pro, which the distinction is between retail and wholesale customers. And what we do is we provided the customers with data such as searches, booking numbers, mapping requirements, and down to a hotel or product granular level. And so the customer can then look at that opportunity and say, hey, if I map this hotel or take content from this hotel that perhaps I'm not accessing at the moment, the potential uplift there is maybe 5,000 room nights a year. So then we can work with that customer to onboard that type of product. So I think providing that type of information has been really important. And then we're also developing business intelligence as a service, particularly from the supplier side. We've done it already a little bit with the customers, but from the supplier side, I think this is something that we're going to be putting a lot more focus on as well, to provide our suppliers, which for us are our hotel partners or tourism attractions, making sure that they've got the information that they need, particularly as more travel corridors start to open up, like Glenn was mentioning earlier. I think as well, the other thing that we're looking at to ensure that frictionless experience is completely modeling an end-to-end process of the traveler journey. Now, for a B2B, that's a little bit more complex than we'd probably like it to be. So, we're looking at all areas of the booking process, whether it be the technology that we use, the operations that we use, payments, which Andreas mentioned before was really an important factor in APAC the last 2 years. And with that map, then ensuring that we can remove as many pain points as possible and provide the solutions that we need. And I think by doing that process, we can ensure then that it's a company-wide approach to the way that we solve those challenges, because at any step along the booking journey, if any process isn't up to scratch, then the whole thing falls apart. So yeah, they're probably the two major things for us.
So seamless and frictionless seems to be two of the buzzwords, right, that we've been using for customers, along with personalization. Dirk, from your perspective, when you're consulting with airlines, what are some of the things that you're seeing happening in that area?
Yeah, so I mean, just a bit of background. I mean, as Simplifying's research director, one of my main interests and sort of focuses is on sustainability, which I know has been a huge topic today as well. And it will be, it's going to be the issue that airlines are going to have to grapple with, over the next few decades as we hit net zero targets in 2050 or 2040 in the case of a few airlines. And sort of the one thing that I personally am looking at are tools that will enable the consumer to sort of to calculate his or her carbon footprint, especially in travel. Now, obviously, a bit of background on that. I mean, we know that sort of that consumer awareness, not only in the global north, about about sustainability concerns, has actually increased during the pandemic. And there's some evidence that pandemic concerns and sustainability concerns have been merged together. But of course, the two roadblocks so far for consumers has been, number one, information, and number two, obviously cost. There's this value intention gap that, someone might say, this is important to me, but of course, then they don't know where to find it. And then when it comes to actually to paying more, there's some reluctance to do so, which is why it's interesting to see, travel providers such as Google Travel, of course, right now has a carbon calculator when you book flights. I know that Skyscanner and a few other ones have done this. And the evidence is that when consumers feel that they are flying more sustainably, consumer satisfaction goes up. I mean, EasyJet had a statistic that in the Q4 2019 annual results, they found that passengers felt more positively about the airline when they were aware that there was carbon offsetting going on, with an 11% increase, and then saying that they would choose to fly EasyJet next time. So the evidence is there that if you provide them with the tools, they will feel better about it, and and they will use them. And so obviously Google has that. Google right now, and Google's travel search engine has it. And I did a test last night where I did a sort of a mock flight from London to Tokyo in July, and it gave me the sort of my CO2 emissions. And interestingly enough, it showed me that the direct route from London to Tokyo with Japan Airlines or ANA was not as carbon efficient as flying via Munich on Lufthansa. And the reason for that is the use of aircraft. Is that Lufthansa uses A320s and A350s, compared to slightly older 777s. But I think the one area which is most interesting for me is not even the consumer market; it's the corporate market. And of course, there's a lot of pressure on corporates to show a reduction in carbon emissions. And one of the easiest ways of corporates of doing so is in so-called Scope 3 emissions, which is the emissions that they use by suppliers. And one of the biggest areas of Scope 3 emissions is in corporate travel. Now, of course, that cutting down on corporate travel hits two functions. Number one, it saves money. And number two, it's a way to show that that you are operating more sustainably. And there are, of course, a number of tech providers in this market right now, which enable corporates and also employees on an individual basis to reduce their carbon footprint, especially with corporate travel. One example is a French company called Greenly, which works with dozens of European corporates. There's another one called Ecometrica. There's Sustainable Life, and all of these are working with corporates to help them to reduce their carbon footprint. Again, with a focus on the travel market.
Thank you for that, Dirk. And so, what some of the trends that we discussed and some of the focus areas that you discussed. So, sustainability is something that's probably it's something that's been discussed for a while now. It's kind of gained traction during the pandemic, and it looks like people are going to follow through with that. But there are also some trends that we spoke about, things like pre-arrival check-ins, pre-registration. I would love to have a conversation later around some of these trends which you feel are going to last post-pandemic, and some of them which are just a function of the pandemic and are not something that's going to be a permanent shift in consumer behavior. So we're going to come back to that in a bit. What I want to focus on is just the aspect of technology adoption and innovation. So Andrew, starting with you this time, what do you think is key to technological innovation and adoption in an organization? So what's important? What's the key factor?
Yeah, I think for us at Hotelbeds, we recognize that technology innovation can be inspired from anyone in the business and from any part of the business. It's not just into a particular silo. Yeah. So I think taking that into account, what we've now done is we've developed a process and a funnel where a lot of those ideas can then be pushed through to create tangible business outcomes. I think a lot of the time people have got really great ideas about how they can use technology in different ways, but feel perhaps a little bit constrained in their existing roles or their silos. So we've created a function, and it's been driven really by our new Chief Technology and Operations Officer, Paula Felstein, who joined us last year. And by bringing operations and technology together, she's got a much clearer view now of some of the things that we can do, which is different for us. I mean, her title CTOO is quite unique in itself. People often go, well, what does that actually mean? And the reason for that is by bringing technology and operations together. So I think having that central with what we do is really important. And I think the other thing as well is by ensuring that your clients are growing with you, by putting that at the center of your business, any sort of technology evolution that you do or any growth is filtered across all different departments. So if you've got a core principle that says, look, we're going to grow with our clients, it doesn't matter which department is involved, they're all working towards the same goal, and technology is an enabler of that. And I think the final piece is in the people that you have. I mean, obviously we want to ensure that we've got as a diverse team as possible, but I think if you're bringing people into the business that are passionate about technology themselves, then that will filter through to whatever interaction you're having. So, you know, if you've got frontline staff who are using technology, educating their suppliers and their clients about the different technology options that you've got available to solve their needs, then that's also half the battle, because you want to ensure that they're, you know, confident and suppliers are you know, using the tools that you've got available to provide them. So I think they're probably the major things for us that we see as important in growing that adoption in the business.
So breaking the silos and focusing on the consumer. And an interesting point, the last point that you brought up regarding the resources, and that's something that Liz also alluded to when she spoke about empowering your employees. And that's another, it's been a major resource crunch in the travel industry, especially from a tech perspective. And is that something that you're seeing as well, getting the right people? And how are you tackling it?
Yeah, look, no doubt. I think that it's been difficult for the travel industry. You know, a lot of the people that have been in the industry are in it for the travel, and we haven't been able to do it. So removing that has been difficult. Yeah, I think for us, we've probably tried to look outside of the industry a little bit more and bringing in some talent from different parts of the business. I mean, our new CEO last year has come from payment platforms. Paula, I mentioned before, has come from a completely different side of the business. So I think we've tried to bring in people from different parts of the business community that still have the skills that we require, but perhaps come with a different approach to things, and then potentially opening up different talent pools as well. But I think it's obvious that there's been massive shortages of talent, and we've been no different to any other business in trying to fill that as much as possible.
Thank you, Andrew. Andres. So what's the key for you guys? What drives all the innovation that happens?
Yeah, I think from our end, the biggest part, since our focus is generally on brand and group level customers, so we have access to a lot of different data. So internally, we've been investing on AI, also being able to automatically analyze data, collect the different information that we're getting from either apps that we build, all the social media platforms. I think overall, the holy grail, I think, for most hotel groups or even companies like ourselves is really that concept of a 360 profile, where you really understand the customer and then are able to provide them with like the information that they want and the products and services that they actually want based on previous activity. But the key thing, I guess, the challenge is also making sure that everything is being done in a very transparent way, secure. We're informing the customer every step of the way, what's being collected, how they're gaining from this kind of like process or workflow. And then that's why I just kind of make sure that we could keep the trust between the customer, the brand, and even our company is generally in the background. We're not like B2C, we're mainly B2B. So as long as we maintain that trust and the security between the data that we're collecting on behalf of our customers, what the guests feel is relevant and how they're being helped in a very passive way, not being aggressive about it. I think it's kind of the key thing as far as like how we're looking at innovation in the future and looking at trends and the data on what people really want versus maybe sometimes a hotel group might want one thing, but we look at the data overall across all our customer set. We could kind of help guide them to the right direction by what people are actually buying or spending money on.
Very interesting. So data is essentially driving the technological innovations. I'm going to come back to you on the B2B point. I have a question for you and for Andrew, actually, but let's go to Dirk. Dirk, what's from your perspective, and since you work with a lot of airlines, what's the one thing that you recommend them for them to be able to be technologically savvy?
Yeah, I mean, actually, sort of tying on to the point that we just heard. I mean, the key for me is really is consumer demand and consumer expectations. I mean, we talk about that the future of airlines, the future of airline brand is really is we call the three S's. So the first one, safety; second one, sustainable business, which I just mentioned, and the third one, sanitation, which is which is a new part of an airline brand, which is going to stay, and customer awareness of of health and safety in sort of in the widest sense will, I think, continue sort of pushing things that we've heard about, such as touchless check-ins and and sort of more automated systems at airports. Similarly, one of the things that I'm sort of tracking is the increase of the automation of customer service. Now, obviously, sort of airline customer service departments have been overwhelmed during the pandemic. And one of the things that I think that's going to happen is we're going to see a speeding up of it moving to, sort of a more AI-led system, something that was already happening pre-pandemic. So you have companies like Caravelle, so a Spanish tech company, which is working with a number of airlines, I believe, in Asia Pacific, such as Scoot, and helping them automate their customer services functions to become more AI driven. So I think it's data, and I think it's consumer demand. I think that is what is pushing technological innovation in the aviation space.
Excellent. So just staying on that point, and since we are nicely segueing into consumer demands, so you spoke about sustainability and you've spoken about safety and what other consumer demand? So the pandemic has actually led to this consumer. I was alluding to it at the beginning when we spoke about all these innovations that the companies are driving right now, of the shifts, basically addressing the shifts in consumer behavior during the pandemic. Some of these shifts might be permanent, some of them might be temporary. What are some, the top 2 or 3 trends that you see are going to last beyond the pandemic, and our travel technology partners should be keeping a very close eye on from consumer behavior perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've really sort of mentioned.
Yeah.
I mean, the first one is, is the continuing adoption of touchless technologies, which, to be fair, is an efficiency which was in a sense long overdue anyway. And I guess that the pandemic has helped spur that on. And of course, the pandemic has been a sort of a life-changing event for really everyone, and it's not something which is going to leave the consumer consciousness anytime soon. So there's more awareness of of health and safety measures and of sanitation with the whole sort of airline and airport process. And I think that will stay. Even though we're seeing at the moment sort of masking requirements and so on, and testing requirements being sort of removed from a lot of countries and for a lot of airlines. I've mentioned sustainability, and I do think that is the issue that obviously that airlines are going to be grappling with over 2050, especially as as consumers become more more aware of the the climate emergency, and are looking for ways to sort of take personal responsibility on that, and are putting pressure on on companies to act more and act more sustainably. So so I do expect to see more tools that will help the consumer travel in a more sustainable way and to make better choices.
Okay, thank you for that. Andrew, anything to add to those 2 trends? So we've got touchless, sustainability. What trends are you betting on, essentially?
Yeah, I think maybe to build on the sustainability piece, I think there's no doubt that the requirement for people to travel locally, if possible, or interregionally, has seen a different type of product that's now being purchased. I think, it was being called the Airbnb effect, I think, in the past. And I think that was kind of already happening with people traveling to regional destinations or off the beaten path a little bit more. The product is very different to what you would normally expect to book through traditional B2B or wholesale partners. So a standalone house, and the way you contract that and merchandise that through to your customers is very different to a 5-star hotel in a capital city. So I think the technology requirements that come from that are also different. You need to be able to provide, in some cases, a one-stop solution for an owner-operator who does the revenue management, the booking system, the check-ins, changes the beds. So I think that's changed, and the clients that are demanding that now are, or clients are now demanding that type of product. I think the other thing to sort of build on also the interregional travel and the domestic travel, I think that's here to stay as well. I think that people have enjoyed the ability to see perhaps areas that they had overlooked or assumed that they wouldn't need to see, and they always considered long haul. And I think that long haul will be incremental to that business. I don't think it will necessarily compete. And already we're seeing, travel coming back in a big way. I mean, Glenn touched on it before in his presentation, but for us, places like Latin America, the US, even Europe, pre obviously the Ukraine war, some of those places were doing pre-pandemic level business for us. And that's without the major long haul travel corridors really traveling, particularly outbound from here in APAC. So I think that's certainly something that's here to stay as well. We may see a different level of competition between destinations that perhaps weren't considering themselves competing. So that'll be quite interesting too.
Okay, all right, Andres.
One of the biggest trends that we kind of see, and just looking at, again, like the data that we process for all our customers, is if you look at the last 2.5 years, everybody's been kind of stuck in one place for the most part, dreaming of like fantasy vacations, planning in their heads where they want to go to next. And during the entire time, one of the biggest trends that we've seen is that from a point of view of what products and services, or even just basic information hotels are providing, the customer expectation today is that it has to be everywhere at any point that they want, to be accessible as far as browsing products, being able to close out transactions. So it's no longer about maybe just an OTA or the hotel's reservation site. Customers are looking at booking over Instagram or even Facebook or Line, all these different social media platforms, being able to pre-check in, book products. So the expectation has kind of completely changed. And then one of the other things that we're seeing is that with the need to have like trusted information, customers are really reaching out directly to properties and wanting to know what's actually available, what services are actually open and bookable. And it's given rise to like a great opportunity for hotels that are ready to take advantage of it. So most of our customers have used this as a chance to kind of start offering trusted services, whether it's experiences that they're doing in-house or from vetted partners, in addition to selling vouchers, different meal plans available there on property, all bookable before someone gets there, closing out the transaction on things that are other than what you would normally expect, driven by kind of like social media and people's need to kind of communicate in the platform that they feel comfortable with and expecting a quick reply back. And in most cases, some customers are driving towards AI and bots, but on the high-end market, it's all personal touch, and you have actual real agents communicating with the customers, negotiating rates over chat platforms and the apps that we build out. And it's really given, again, that trust for the customer that what you want to do, what you plan to be this dream vacation or trip while you've been cooped up in your house for the last 2 years is going to be available. You'll be able to do everything that you saw on an Instagram post or Facebook, and you could book it and securely know that it'll be available once you get to the property.
Immediate gratification.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so since you brought up B2B again, Andres, I'm going to ask my question to you right now. So we've been seeing conflicting trends, right? So last 2 years, cutting costs, a lot of companies have, I've seen companies and OTA specifically taking their, if they had development partners, technology partners, taking the development in-house and doing it themselves, while there are some who have cut down on the development staff and outsource it to tech providers, right? B2B tech providers. How do you, so being a B2B provider yourself, how do you see this trend in the future? What's the future of B2B tech providers?
Yeah, I think there definitely is a big shift, because like even for us, we noticed, let's say 3 years ago, there was a lot of groups who have internal development, or you had, let's say, multiple systems that did one specific function and then it connected together by another provider. So those days are kind of gone, mainly because of resources, like you mentioned earlier. Obviously, there had to be a lot of cost cutting and getting ready to survive during the 2-year pandemic that we've gone through. But I think now the resurgence is hotel groups are just really looking at one, outsourcing most of the work, but looking at one provider that can do multiple modules at once and handle multiple things, which is both good and bad, because you have a lot of cases where you have different vendors. Like most of our partners, we have overlapping functionality, but we work together on it depending on the right customer. So it's always a kind of like a good chance and opportunity to really help out the customer, because at the end, they're dealing with maybe increased booking now, especially that all the countries are opened up, but less staff, which staffing has become a very big problem as far as getting new people. So automating the back of house, making sure all systems connected, and really what the hotels are really wanting now is cutting down the amount of partners or systems that they're actually implementing, not just because of cost, just for the rapidness of being able to make a request and see it happen right away versus waiting months. And by the time the months are over, maybe it's not needed anymore. So it's really about rapid feedback, implementation, and cutting down the number of companies that most hotels worked with before, which has helped us a lot because we have a lot of different modules that a customer could add on. So when someone comes to us, they kind of will either look at, maybe they only want one module to help them out based on their needs, and we can connect to other partners, or they'll take 30 modules. So it really depends on the needs and what that corporate is looking to cut down on, helping them focus on like their core business values.
And I'm sure Andrew has an opinion on this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Andreas makes a really good point that consolidation is absolutely happening. And again, like most things with the pandemic, has accelerated an existing trend. I think for us, we've probably moved on from viewing distribution as a B2B or B2C thing, for loss of a better word. I think it's more just around distribution and the type of clients and strengths and weaknesses that each different distribution partner can provide. And I think that hotels in particular have obviously had a significant shift in the resources that they have. So, the ability for them to have staff on the ground, perhaps in, destinations where they would go and have either a GSA or would go and do regular sales calls, that no longer exists anymore. So they're looking for partners to be able to be that sales arm or that distribution partner for them. And as such, also reducing the number of partners that they're working with. So I think that's certainly been a significant shift as well. But yeah, I think like anything, the technology is enabling so much cross-selling between so many different functions of the distribution chain now that what you would consider to be B2B distribution can quite easily become B2C and vice versa. So I think the ability to work with partners who have a grasp of that and can control distribution is absolutely critical. And that's why we're seeing a lot of the global chains in particular driving that consolidation across the segment.
Okay. All right. Okay. So we have 8 minutes left. Got a message. Just a reminder to the audience that the Q&A is open. So if you want to send in your questions, feel free to. I am going to do a quick fun round of rapid fire questions and then take questions from the audience. So Dirk, I'm going to start with you. Very simple. I'm going to give you 2 choices. You need to pick one. Don't think too much. Okay. Work from home or work from office?
Well, we don't actually have an office because we have staff everywhere. So work from home.
Work from home. All right. That's the permanent state. OTA or airline direct?
Airline direct.
Mobile or laptop?
Laptop, because of the limitations of sort of working on a small screen.
Luxury hotel or local stay?
Luxury hotel.
Okay. Planned or spontaneous?
Planned. When you have children, it's the only way.
All right. And your favorite travel app?
My favorite travel what?
Travel app.
My favorite travel app is probably something like Momondo, which is Skyscanner, which is an aggregator of flights.
Meadow. Okay. Thanks, Dirk.
Okay,
all right.
Yes, right. Yes.
Okay. All right. So who wants to go next? Andres or Andrew? Who's unmuting themselves? All right.
That's fine.
Okay, Andrew. Work from home or work from office?
I've just moved back to the office, so I have to say office.
Red eye or day flight?
Red eye.
Email or text?
Email.
iOS or Android?
Android.
Beaches or mountains?
Mountains.
Oh, okay. That goes against the research, which said people want to go to beaches. All right.
Go.
What's your favorite app? Travel app?
You know what? It's probably the tram tracker app that we have in Melbourne, which allows them to see how long the trams are away. Just that immediate ability to know. So yeah, you can see I haven't traveled too much overseas recently.
All right. Okay, Andrews, you ready? I'm going to ask you the same first question. Work from home or work from office?
I think from office.
Okay. Rail, car, or flight?
Flight.
App or website?
App.
Physical menu or QR code?
Physical menu, but we do make QR codes.
Spider-Man or Superman?
Spider-Man.
Okay. Favorite travel app?
Well, this might be a little bit boring, but I actually still just love using Agoda to book any travel. So it's like the main one that I use to book any hotel outside of the dedicated property apps we build.
Okay, all right. Okay, so let me take, I see a question from the audience, Paul from Denmark. Great discussions about empowering consumers, but how can, okay, there seem to be a lot of questions there, but how can technological innovation be used to empower and enable tourism communities, especially in rural areas? The second part to that question is, how can it bridge the gap between cities and rural communities, especially as tourists are showing an interest in visiting scenic areas and connecting with local cultures? So that's something, Andrew, that you had mentioned, you were talking about earlier of local stays and these small, like single property providers. So taking that question to the next level, just talking about enabling tourism communities in rural areas, how do you see technological innovation being used? Whoever would like to, Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think having connectivity as a starting point is really, really important, because then it opens up the ability to educate and to explain to regional communities how distribution works, how the traveler experiences their product, and to be able to also set the expectations for the travelers before they arrive, because there's inevitably there can be clashes between what expectations are and what the experience is. So I think that's absolutely important. And then I think being able to have solutions that are, as I said before, as single touch as possible, particularly for the operators, because they just don't have the time and resources to be able to log into hundreds of different extranets and manage different systems. So as much as possible, having systems that are single touch, I think, is really critical as well.
Hey, Dirk, Andres, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only thing I would add to it is that it's giving tourists and consumers choices, because the evidence is that they do want to support local communities more, but they don't know how and they don't know where. So it's really a question of of travel providers and travel apps making it clear how they are able to do so. And I think that's one way of bridging that divide and bridging that gap.
Absolutely. Andres, anything that you would like to add to that?
Yeah, just one thing, guys. I think over the last couple of years, especially on the higher end, like customer segment we help manage, they've been very good at actually making local relationships with different communities, or even like local activities, and packaging it together as kind of like a luxury experience. It's really worked out well. It makes the local community get involved, whether it's in a city or even a rural area. So hotels like Six Senses have a very good connection with the different communities around the properties, and even hotels like Anantara have a good relationship. And I think what we've been seeing is that since that's directly correlated back to revenue to any hotel, it's like the next step where even if you're not a 5 or 6 star property, you're going to be looking at making some type of like a cultural connection to plan out tours. Again, having that trusted products and services that you can provide, whether you're the one completely fulfilling it or only making the connection between that traveler and the property and these kind of different cultural activities or sightseeing trips they could do while they're in the community.
Thank you, Andres. And just so that we don't extend anymore, I would like to thank all of you for the time today. Really appreciate all sharing your thoughts and the insights, and sharing about what you've been working on. There are a lot of trends that we spoke about. Some of the trends like touchless, sustainability, instant gratification, personalization. These are trends that we need to keep, the travel industry needs to keep a very close eye on. And no doubt, the moral of the story is technology is the future, is the prerogative for progress. So really glad to see most of the travel companies investing in technology, and so many tech providers coming up with such unique solutions. And I was really fascinated by what Victor shared during his presentation. So thanks a lot for your time. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Paul. Paul, over to you.
Thank you very much, Saima. Fantastic job. A great discussion. Really, I think I see even all the presenters that spoke earlier today, they're even still here as well. So, and thank you so much to all of our panelists. Said fantastic job. Thank you, of course, to all of our presenters who spoke earlier in this webinar. Really a great overview about what is happening in the space regarding technology technology innovation. So I'll just do a quick wrap up here before we end this webinar. So again, thank you to Dirk, Andrew, and Andres for joining us at panel, and thank you, of course, Sama, for doing an excellent job of moderating that very engaging and insightful discussion. So just wanted to just note you on two things. There were some startups that Victor had mentioned. My colleague's going to drop a link in the chat. So there's a showcase from two of these startups that have emerged since the pandemic. So you can find out more about just two examples of startups that have come up and started innovating because of the pandemic and how they're actually helping to enable travel recovery. So I believe my colleague has dropped it into the chat. If not, you can always email me or email me, and I'm happy to send you those links to those videos. My email I'll show you at the very end. So with that, I also wanted to mention the report that Victor had mentioned, as Liz had mentioned as well. The title is The Hard Reboot, How Technology Powers Mobility. It's available on our website. Just look for catalog, or you can go to www.pata.org/catalog. If you enjoyed this webinar, please do join us for our other events happening later this year. We will actually have two in-person events confirmed as of now. First is our Pata Destination Marketing Forum happening in Songkhla, Thailand. That's in the south. Easy to get there. It's in Hat Yai. You fly directly to Hat Yai from Bangkok. But that'll be happening from August 2nd to 4th. It is a one-day destination experience. So you'll visit either a fishing village, go on a tour where you can have a mix of nature meeting culture, and also understand the heritage of Singora, which is the name for Songkhla, the old name for Songkhla. Then later on in the year, we have our Pata Annual Summit, and that will be happening in Ras Al Khaimah from October 25th to 27th. So if you're a member, you should definitely come, because of course we have our internal meetings, our board meetings, but also we do have conference sessions. We will have experiential experiences. Kind of weird. Sorry, and of course we'll have some travel market points to that as well. If you have any questions about today's webinar or about any of our events, feel free to email me. My email is right there on the screen. If you want a link to those videos, feel free to also email me as well. If you missed any part of this webinar will be available on our YouTube channel. It's actually currently streaming on our Facebook page. So, you can always go back to our Facebook page and also just go back and rewind and catch any parts you might have missed. Some of the presentations will be available after the webinar, and we'll be sending out an email with links to both the videos and the presentations. So with that is officially the end of our webinar, and we're finishing just a little over time. So once again, thank you to all of our speakers, our moderator. Thank you, of course, to Victor and the team at VIN for helping us with the reports. Thank you to my team for helping me with today's webinar. And lastly, and most importantly, thank you to all of you for joining us for today's webinar. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Thank you. Have a good day. Stay safe, and I will see you next time. Take care.